Okay, in today's video I'm going to talk about Salesforce and Google Ads. Basically how to link your Salesforce account to your Google Ads account. And there's a number of different reasons and ways, I should say too, technically. There's several different reasons why a person would want to do that. I'm going to go through what those are. I'm going to go through what the benefits are. I'm going to go through some of the challenges you may have. Basically, is it worth doing it? And the way that I've learned to do it, just cut through, the shortcut way of getting through this, basically. I've done it the wrong way. I've done it, the easy way. I figured out all this stuff kind of for you, at least at a very high level, to get you set up with it so you don't have to struggle like I did when I initially had to start out doing this many years ago, and Google came out with a better direct integration process with Salesforce, which in and itself it's not easy for a newcomer coming outside and doing this, because I help people with this all the time still, but it's gotten a little easier with Salesforce integration with Google Ads, and I'm going to give you the rest of the stuff you need to know in order to do that. So first of all, though, the thing that I mentioned there, is it worth it to do? So basically, I just wanted to let you know right off the top, I always like to tell people at the start of our videos, what's the point of all this, Corey? Why am I going to go through all this work? 2 to 5 times increase in the ROI of your campaigns if you're running what is called like a two-step process in your sales. So if you're generating leads, in other words, 2 to 5 times increase in ROI for what you're doing right now today without the Salesforce integration, i.e. revenue tracking that you could done by hooking up your Salesforce account to your Google Ads account. Some people are not doing it to track revenue inside Google Ads. They want to see how many leads they got were of a certain quality or just qualified. You can also do that. This process is also going to show you how to do that. I'm going to say that for most practical purposes, if you're going to go through this before I get started in explaining how, you're going to want to get the actual sales revenue inside your account so you can optimize based upon revenue. What's actually producing bottom line revenue out of your ads, you can optimize for that, which is the whole basic point of doing this, as I'm going to show you today, and linking your accounts together like that. For people who don't typically know are able to close a deal in 90 days, which Google by and large or by default is set up to, when the user clicks, they could track up to 90 days to see whether or not that person ultimately, from the time that they initially get to the site and after they've clicked on the ad to turn into a lead, you have 90 days to track them, for them to come back. But also once they turn into a lead, you can track, so let's say it was 10 days from the time they got to, after they clicked your ad till they turned into a lead. Well, that now leaves you 80 days, if you've set it up for the maximum conversion window, to have that person show their known value to you in terms of revenue. It could be contract value, so it couldn't be received value, but contracted value, spaced out over 12 months, I should get this, therefore the contract is worth this, therefore we could assume this sale is going to be worth this. But you have 90 days from the time that they click to decide what the value is. And so for some people, you're selling such a big deal, a 7-figure deal or something like that. All you're able to do respectively, because there's not a high enough percentage of people from the time they click to buy, or just based upon you having higher funnel advertising set up, i.e. advertising to people fundamentally during the research stage, that you have to then optimize your account based upon whether or not, if that lead is a quality lead or not. Instead of a lead, it's now an opportunity. And then at least with that, you could guide your ads a heck of a lot better than just, optimizing your account for what produces a lead. Everybody who's been generating leads with Google Ads know a lead is not a lead is not a lead. And so this process sifts through which of the leads you want more of and which of them you want less of. It's not always so easy as people think. people that are new into doing this kind of optimization or just optimization with their Google ads, they're not getting the ROI they want. They want to get serious about optimizing. They think, oh, well, there's a certain part of the account I want. There's a part that I don't want. No. For all practical purposes, you obviously can do anything you want, but you're going to be able to, you want the power to know how much something is worth. How much is one visitor worth versus another visitor? How much is somebody worth that clicks on an ad from this keyword versus another keyword? So I could decide through using a little bit of math what I should pay for somebody who searches for keyword 1 versus keyword 2 that can generate, what you're trying to do is generate across the board as many conversions and sales as you can get that will generate a minimum amount of ROI that you find is bare minimum acceptable for what you're going to do in your business there, wherever you can get it. And so, you could do it based upon how that demographics and who that user is, and ultimately how they search. So there's two different levels, but if the key is you got to have the data to be able to know what each user is worth and how much and how each user finds you is worth. And when you apply what I call a gradient across the account, all these different levels that tell you all about the users that you're paying for on a regular basis are worth, you can dial up your bids, what you're willing to pay for this user a little bit more, if they've got this trait, a little less for this trait. At the end of the day, you've got then ultimately as many sales as you can get that will generate at least the minimum level of ROI that you want. So if you're just optimizing, so obviously a lot of people don't even track whether or not they got a lead or not. Whether, for the most part, did they call, did they fill out a form? You can do both of those very easily in Google Ads using a software like CallRail and using Google Tag Manager. If you're already tracking that and you want to add on this actual revenue or opportunity level tracking, the way that I described it, you're going to get a 2 to 5 times increase in ROI off of that. If you have no lead tracking at all, you could double this. You're basically looking at 5 to 10 times the ROI having revenue tracking versus no tracking on leads at all. Just to let you know the scope and the seriousness of the situation. So and that's even assuming after a period of optimization. Let's say you've been optimizing for more leads for a while. You're kind of plateauing. You add this revenue/opportunity tracking to the mix, you're going to get a 2 to 5x ROI increase, or capability to earn 2 to 5 times more profit from what you're doing right now, optimizing for more leads. Because for the matter that you'll be there, when you try to optimize for more leads, some leads will certainly be cheaper, but there's other people who know the leads that come in from XYZ keyword are junk. You don't know that. You're leveraging up on those type of people because they're so darn cheap, not knowing, because that lead that came from that keyword or leads that came from that keyword are mixed in with everything else. So basically you're the sucker in that situation. Sorry if that offends you guys or anybody out there, but I try to keep things into perspective, just get straight to the point here. So anyway, if you've got all the revenue in your account though, so you know the kind of results you can expect. So why you want to link Salesforce or any CRM, could be Zoho has this, or any other CRM, the same stuff applies to Google Ads in the first place. It's because you can then know what you should be paying for each user based upon their trait and how they're searching. And you can actually adjust your bids. If you search for a bid adjustment formula, you have a formula that can tell you what you should be spending for each user based upon the keyword they typed in, the ad they clicked on, the gender of the user, the age of the user, the device they searched on, the state that they are from, if you're a national provider, the city that they're in, the time of the day they search, the day of the week they search, the day of the month they search, which some of these aren't really big for, but for other businesses it's huge. If you're in a space where you're B2C, people that certain times of the month, people have more disposable income. Household income, use a lot of companies, unless we're targeting the top 10% of income demographics nationwide, it doesn't work. Like a high-end resort, like a fitness resort where you're supposed to lose weight. A lot of people are interested in that. Only so many people can afford the $30K price tag. Parental status of the user and other interests. You can identify through audiences, and this is pretty much infinite. If this user has a high school education, they're worth more. Or you can find out they're worth less. And you can observe based upon different interests. If that person's already interested in wedding registries and you're selling something to the user that is for a wedding, that user statistically now is worth a little bit more to you, given that they're on this list of what Google considers interested in that particular topic. So now I can spend more if they're searching for my keyword and that I'm bidding on, and they've already been on this list that Google has predefined as interested in wedding registries. So you get Salesforce hooked up to your Google Ads, as much of a pain in the butt as it is. You get the reward of seeing on all these different levels, some being more important than others for you guys out there, and then being able to identify what you should be willing to pay for one user that's versus California versus Texas, somebody who's 18 years old versus 55 in the prime of disposable income brackets, so on and so forth. So now you know why you're going to want to go through hell here, because it's not easy. Somebody who has an internal IT staff, I will say it's relatively shouldn't be that difficult at all. If you're doing this yourself and you don't have an IT background, quite a bit harder. But you're such a big profit in this. If you don't have the skills, get as far as you can, understand it at a base level, which is what I'm trying to do for you here. Find somebody on Upwork who can just type in Salesforce to Google. There's somebody out there who's done this before you can hire. This will tell you enough information not to get hosed or schooled by them, though. Understanding what it takes versus what they tell you it takes, and having no result at the end of the day. Even if they hosed you on the price and it still got done, it's still worth it. But at the same time, the important thing is just that it gets done. Anyway, moving on. Your options for linking Google Ads to Salesforce. Now, technically, there's a way to actually import revenue, or whether or not you can identifying if a lead turned into an actual opportunity, i.e. it was a qualified lead or not, into your Google Ads account through manual process if you're using Salesforce now versus the actual direct integration of Salesforce that Google has now out of the box. So you're asking why, basically, Corey, would I want to do it manually? Well, there's pros and cons of actually doing it the automatic way, to where ultimately if your team is using Salesforce like they're supposed to be using it, and if everything ultimately arrives there and it's being updated like it's supposed to be, there's basically the drawbacks of doing it so it's fully automated once it's set up is there could be glitches in the data at some point, and if there is a glitch in there and you're not having somebody regularly monitor and audit your system, you could have months of lost data. And that may not seem like a big data thing to you now, but the big part of what you spend big money on in Google Ads is to see what didn't work versus what did work, because what didn't work tells you what did work, and that's where the big time money is. And doing it the automatic way it's much harder to set up, whereas the manual way, it's more straightforward to set up. It's not as complicated. But of course, the drawback to doing it the manual way is, of course, you've got to have an active process that you got to do, and you got to trust somebody to actually manually import your sales data from Salesforce that you have now to Google Ads using their manual process to upload it. So you can get the pain out of the way and get it done the automatic way now, and then it's done, or it's easier to get it up and going doing it the manual way, but it'll take more time over time. For all practical purposes, I'll also say that if you're doing hundreds of sales a month, for the most part, I would just go with the automatic, because it gets to be onerous at some point. You got too many calls, you got too many leads coming in. If you are doing, let's say under 100 a month, which means you're also a smaller company at that point, there should be somebody in your team or that can help you do it. And ultimately, if you're working with a PPC agency, you can just point this video to them, tell them that you'd like to set this up through the manual process, and then just provide them an export from your Salesforce each month, once a month, which is normally what I do for our clients here. Then we import it for you and you don't have to worry about it. So there's potential for errors doing it the automatic way, unless you obviously audit it on a regular basis, which would take care of that problem. And then it takes longer to execute the manual way, but the time and setup is actually more onerous by doing this automatic process I'm going to explain to you here now. So that covers all the drawbacks and advantages. Now, normally, so the manual process, assuming you have Salesforce now and you want to get your data from Salesforce into Google Ads, you're going to need to, so you have your leads in Salesforce that come in right now. What you're going to do is you're going to set up your Salesforce leads, which if you're using the form code that Salesforce gives you to put on your site, you're going to make sure that form code picks up what is called the GCLID. GCLID code, which shows up in the URL of the user's browser once they click on the ad. How it works is then when somebody fills out the form has what is called a hidden field, which asks, which queries or looks at the URL and looks for this GCLID code, which is essentially a serial number that Google assigns to every single ad clicker that they have. So, which does nothing unless they fill out the form. If they fill out the form, then along with the rest of the form contents there that is being collected by the user, it also grabs the GCLID, i.e. the serial number that Google gives to the click, along with the rest of their information and puts it into your database there on Salesforce. So in your leads menu, you're going to export then all of the lead information, which would then now also include the GCLID code. And I put it into a Google Sheet. Google Sheet because I can share this sheet with several people, one which manages it, one which puts data on it. So it's more collaborative, of course. You can use what you want. I'm also using Unbounce for our landing pages on a lot of most campaigns now anymore. With that, Unbounce has a direct integration that can work directly with Salesforce, by the way. And so the leads as they come in can go to Salesforce. But one way or another, you need to get the Unbounce forms. If you have a landing page or another landing page software, you can, through Unbounce, you can set up a hidden form field to collect the GCLID code you need as well, which will be collected if they've clicked on a Google ad and then filled out the form, so that user ultimately, the user information from the form and the GCLID code can be added to the Google Sheet. So you have any landing page form leads with the GCLID and the Salesforce that would come from any other parts of your site that are not a landing page could also end up on the sheet. So you have so now ultimately you have any leads from your landing page, any leads from the rest of your site. And you're asking, well, if I'm using a landing page, why would I care about the rest of my site? A good 10, maybe 20% varies by market of people will get to your landing page and then they'll end up on the main part of your site to investigate your company a little bit more before they respond. You got to realize people don't like talking to salespeople. They know they're weak. That's until they're fully ready and trust you. They're not going to fill out the form. Well, that form is more convenient to go to on your Contact Us page after they went to your main site from your landing page to identify should they or do they want to contact you versus somebody else first. So that's why you also want the GCLID code collected on all other forms on your site, which if you're using the Salesforce form, you would make sure that Salesforce on the form code that they give you collects the GCLID code. If not, you just add a hidden form field to your form and then we collect it anyway. And then of course you have people that call in. Some people don't have people calling in, and by the way, if you don't have a phone number for people to call in, you're throwing a ton of your money away, because there's people that literally won't do business with you unless they see a phone number available, which can be upwards of 50% of your leads will disappear by not having a phone number, because why would you do business with somebody if you have a complaint you can't call them up? It's too easy to ignore somebody by email, and people know it. But anyway, through CallRail will, I told you about the GCLID code before, it'll collect that GCLID code, and when somebody calls and if you CallRail, if you don't know it, it just basically is a program that allows you to have an artificial number there on your site that takes the place of your real number, so when the user calls in, they're routed to your real number, and so that they can collect the user's information. Well, they record the calls so you can audit what people call, and then it also tells you where they came from. But it also collects the GCL ID code as well, so that ultimately when you need to put the leads that you get on this Google sheet with the form leads that came in, you can then listen to the call recording and you can write in, okay, Joe Smith, put that on the Google sheet. Somebody can do that for you. And then next to the caller's name in CallRail there, you can click on a button and it tells you the GCL ID code of that caller. So you could put the name of the person and what time they called in and the GCL ID code, which now you have the calls there as well with your form leads. So you have your form leads, you have your calls, and then you basically got what you need here. So you have it all on your Google sheet. Now, the next step is there's an extra process here, which you're going to have because it is the manual process. You're going to do an accounting export. So on your Google sheet, I always put the first name, last name of the lead, the GCL ID code, if of course, for the ones that you find that have the GCL ID code, which would mean they came from a Google ad. And I'm going to go to my billing software and I'm going to look at the name of the person who bought and how much they bought. And if the name on the Google sheet now has the same name, I'm going to put it on another column designated for revenue with that amount of revenue that they spent. Of course, if you're tracking lead quality and you can't do revenue for whatever reason, you could, wherever you can find the information about what leads, obviously we're talking about Salesforce here. You can go into Salesforce and you can look under your opportunities, and I'll actually do an accounting export to see who bought once a month and then put that revenue data on my sheet once a month. Well, if you're tracking opportunities, you could go to the opportunities tab on Salesforce, look at it or export it from Salesforce once a month, and then line up whoever turned into an opportunity here. Look at the, and anything that matches up as the usernames that match up, you're going to put on, and then there'll be a column that just basically says opportunity, yes or no, and you're going to put yes for the ones that you find on your sheet there from before, so that you know which ones actually turn into an opportunity. Either way, now your sheet will be ready to upload to Google. You go to the little wrench icon in the top right hand corner of your screen. Under conversions, there's an uploads menu. You're going to upload that Google sheet there, and ultimately, if you're tracking opportunities, the ones that were no opportunity, you'll just remove those, and ultimately any of the leads that did not have revenue attached to them through that last step I told you about, you'll just remove those, so that when you upload it, it basically knows, because you still have the GCL ID in a separate column along with your revenue or along with your data that told you it was an opportunity, positive opportunity, then they know which of their users that they store the GCL ID code on from way back when they initially clicked on the ad bought or turned into an opportunity, and then also which of the and also have that revenue or positive opportunity shown as a conversion show up on each one of these submetrics in your account, so you can then optimize and set a unique value of what you're willing to pay for each user based upon how many opportunities or how much sales revenue came from each one of these areas. So hopefully that makes sense how it actually logistically works here. Now, the automatic version of this. So if you don't want to do as much work long term as mentioned, you can do more work up front. There's less moving parts here with the automatic version technically. So you have your Salesforce form from before. It's going to import data to Salesforce. Your unbounce is linked to Salesforce. You have your unbounce forms there if you have it. You're going to use CallRail on your landing pages and the rest of your site, so that when somebody calls from Google Ads, that GCL ID code is going to be tied to that user. And actually, in this particular case, so that you don't have to listen to the call recordings and write down the GCL ID and then put it on your Google sheet, as I told you about before, there's a way to also link CallRail to your Salesforce. what it'll do is that it'll show up as a lead there, and with the lead, it'll have the GCLID code on it. So when you turn it into a contact, of course, it'll keep the GCLID code with it, and it'll keep the GCLID code all the way into a closed deal if it gets that far. With Unbounce, by the way, when you link Unbounce to Salesforce, it'll ask you if you want to have it show up as a lead or a contact. I would just by default choose lead. And then the way that it works, actually, by the way, is it says, okay, here's your form fields on your form. Here's the form fields on Salesforce for your lead. Where do you want name to show up on Salesforce for the correspond, so that it knows where to put what information. And you map all that out through Unbounce. CallRail is the same way with the integration. So CallRail takes the user's number and so on and so forth. So if you want to put that on Salesforce, it allows you to map it out through the integration itself to where it should show up in Salesforce under that lead. That it generates a new lead and then takes the information from CallRail where you tell it to put it on that particular lead. So because you're doing a direct integration from CallRail to Salesforce, all that information is on Salesforce automatically. Same from Unbounce, same from all of your forms on your site, because you're using Salesforce form code to collect the lead, therefore it would go directly into Salesforce. If you're using Salesforce and you're not using the Salesforce form code to power your forms on your main site, and you're putting it into Salesforce manually, well then there, by the way, is a hidden form field code that Google gives you. It's called, for offline conversion tracking, there's a snippet of code they give you to add to your forms on your site that will then, as a hidden form field, as I kind of talked about before, collect the GCLID code from the user's browser in the URL bar, so that when that user fills out the form and you get an email, that GCLID code is with the rest of that user's information, so that when you go manually put it into Salesforce, you also have an opportunity to put the GCLID code in there that you got it in your email, by the way, if you were doing that. But we're talking about an automatic here. So basically, to truly make it this automatic, you're going to use the Salesforce form code on every form of your site. On Unbounce, you're going to do a direct integrate or whatever landing page builder you have. I would recommend using one with a direct integration like Unbounce has that provides direct integration with Salesforce. That's going to put your form leads from any landing page into Salesforce automatically and map it out to exactly where it needs to go through that integration process. And then you have CallRail also directly integrated, which CallRail directly integrates, has a process for direct integration with Salesforce, so that at the end of the day, all leads from all form fills and all calls you have show up there in Salesforce automatically. And this GCLID code that works the magic, if you will, of being able to import sales revenue or whether or not a lead was qualified or not to your Google Ads account again, is in there with the lead automatically. So at that point in time, basically there, you can, once you've set all that this initial first process I described you up, you could go into the direct integration section of Google Ads, which is under the top right hand section of your account again, under where the wrench icon is, and then under conversions. Within there, that menu, there's a Salesforce button on the left-hand menu. Could be changed by the time you actually get to this video, which allows you to do, it'll say Salesforce, and then from Salesforce, it allows you to do the direct integration between Google Ads and your Salesforce account. And in that integration, it'll ask you, kind of like how the CallRail and Unbounce integration goes, it's going to ask you, okay, here's the data from Salesforce. What do you want imported? Which it'll basically, what you're defining is a conversion. When do you want a conversion to happen? When the user gets converted from a lead to a contact, or a contact to a deal, or a deal to a one deal. You can do any one of those things. I recommend just doing them all, because the extra data, whether or not you use it at all, well, you may use it later, you maybe not, just do them all. And and then there's also an option with all conversions to have a conversion value. And you want the conversion value to be ported in from your one deal, along with the conversion that says, please trigger a conversion when deal equals 1, with the with the blank, if you will, or the field that has what the deal value is, so that ultimately in your conversions menu when you're done, it'll have one conversion for a lead, one conversion for deal, and one conversion for one deal. So it'll be 3 separate goals there if you did it the way that I just told you that you could. And the one deals will have a value tied to it, which is how much that a particular customer or client was worth and how much they ultimately paid, or what the contract is worth. For people, again, that have massive deals and they can't within 90 days generally even find out what that person's going to be worth in 90 days from the time that they click on the ad, well, of course, you can just track and import and rely on for your optimization of your ads on each one of these individual levels I talked about earlier, based upon whether or not that person turned into a contact or even turned into a deal, your choice. But because you have any one of those, from contact to deal to one deal to decide, that's going to be the basis of information. You're going to change what you're willing to pay for a user on each one of these individual levels, keyword, the ad, the gender of the user, so on and so forth, to guide your ads. And the closer you get to actual revenue, the better off you're going to be, because that's going to give you the most accurate set of data to adjust your bids to be able to get the maximum profitability from your Google ads that you can run in your market. And ultimately, 95% of the time out there, 95% of markets, they're not going to have anybody who's going to do this. A lot of people don't use Salesforce, obviously. Of the people that use Salesforce, almost nobody's going to import their revenue or opportunity information, as I'm describing here. You are probably going to be the only one. That's why you're going to get the 2 to 5x increase in profit by doing this and actually using your data as I described, using the bid modification and bid modification formula process on every level in your account that you can. If you want to see what certain gender is making versus another, you go into the gender menu of your account, you go to customize columns, then you select the conversion value, and then it tells you male, this is your how much you made. And you can also select customize columns, conversion value over cost, which is your ROI, and that'll tell you what the ROI is for male versus female, and then it'll say, if you have manual bidding set up, how much you're willing to bid for male versus female now that you know male converts at 2 times female, which would be double to get as many as you can. So your ad has more chance to show up for a male who actually did the rest of the things that you require for that ad to trigger, which is they searched for, indoor plumbing, commercial indoor plumbing. That was the keyword. Because, as a lot of people don't recognize, the ads don't show up every time. There's an algorithm that decides whether your ad is showing or not, and it's based upon how much you're willing to pay, but also how good you are at setting up your ads and your click-through rate and so on and so forth. But generally never will your ad show up 100% of the time. So if you know that male's worth way more and you have that information to tell Google you're willing to pay double, you're going to get most of the males, and you'll let everybody else that don't have the information get the females now. Not being gender biased here, but just, of course, is just an example. And you're now buying all the profitable customers, and you're basically tricking everybody else that you're competing against now to buy all the unprofitable customers. They're paying full rate for something that converts at half the value. Now you're paying, of course, you could pay the same amount, but you're not actually going to pay the same amount. You're going to want to run more aggressively the stuff that's most profitable, and less. You're going to bid less for what's less profitable. That's going to get you the most maximum profit you can. If you want super high ROI, you'll make a little less, but the ROI will be more. If you actually bid less on the stuff that's less profitable and the same for the stuff that's more profitable. So you can take it as you will, but I'm going to be doing more if it's more profitable, less if it's less profitable by default on every account that I work on once I have worked hard to get all this data into my account. But that's in general how the process works, why you're going to do it, and how you're going to, and ultimately how you do it. What are your options to be able to do it for your company? So for the most part, though, I told you through the automatic method there could be potential errors. For the most part, I've found it's pretty reliable as long as you have a manager that manages Salesforce in and itself, and make sure people are using it. There's no errors in there, so on and so forth. If you don't have that, I almost have to say that, and you don't again have more than 100 sales a month doing the manual process, because you're going to have again less room for problems. So basically, it comes down to, are you a huge company? Just go for the automatic process. You probably have all the infrastructure and process set up to run it automatic. If not, go with the manual. Try to get, and as a bonus, you could try to ask the people, the ad agents, PPC agency that you're working with to do this for you. I'll tell you right off the bat, if you tell them that you want to start tracking the revenue, they may go, oh, we can't do that, because they don't, this hidden secret in this whole space is people charge cheap because that's what the client wants to buy, but then they hide the results because they can't get results on a little bit of money. Nobody wins, everybody feels good, but nobody makes any money. Versus, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here too much again, I told you I don't like to do on my videos, but versus somebody who charges a lot, they're going to use your data and they're going to get way, way, way higher profit. So there is no benefit to you to saving money on a PPC service. And if they won't do this, or they seem scared by it, that should be a clue to you that you're not working with the right company to begin with. Just as a general side tip to all of this. Anyway, hopefully that made sense of the whole Salesforce to Google Ads thing. If you have any questions about the integration process or what it can do for you, leave a comment down below. I get back to everybody who comments on my videos. I have a blog that has a lot of other PPC money-making strategies, how to do campaigns the way that I do it for our clients that guarantee results that are shown to you step by step. You can check that out if you haven't looked at that yet. And of course, tons of other videos on this channel that talk about the other strategies I use. Stuff that you have to know that'll make you a lot more money with your PPC campaigns, whether it's Google, Bing, Facebook, whatever you're running, LinkedIn ads, whatever, for you as well. If you haven't browsed through the rest of my channel, you should do that, of course, as well. Anyway, I hope that put it into a good frame of reference for you on how this is actually done, get you put on the right track, and are successful in working with the right people to get you on without too much hassle in the process, and reinforce, yes, that ultimately it's a little tricky, but yes, you do want to do this for your business. It is indeed worth it for you to do it.